There is so much uncertainty right now in the world, and particularly in your world as well. There's ambiguity, there's complexity that you need to deal with on every corner. Yet your agenda is a growth agenda for the organization, despite the pandemic, despite the circumstances in which we live. What advice would you give your contemporaries who also have a strong growth agenda in challenging times? How can you persist? How do you stay true? How are you successful? What's some advice that you can give to others?
So my advice is going to be the advice I give to my 17-year-old. Work is not hard when it's something that you're passionate about. And, we're discussing what happens next in his search for meaning in his life in terms of where he goes to school, what school looks like. My advice to him is the gift of my, as you nicely put it, many years of experience, is that when you're passionate about something, that the complexity becomes an intrinsic motivation, right? So you want to understand the dimensionality of the issues, and the complexity becomes less complex because you're very engaged and because it matters. And I think you know that in yourself, and you're willing to put in a lot because you get a lot. And I think the advice is, when you ever find a disconnect between that, it's time to step back and reflect. And be very deliberate about the reflection about that disconnect. It's always work, but it's not the same intellectual, emotional, experiential, outcomes-based things all align, then it's magic.
You talk about being passionate. So for you, it is alignment with a cause, believing in something larger and giving yourself fully towards it. So knowing what are your beliefs and what you're fighting for, and following that path. You mentioned complexity, and I have a little bit of a bias against complexity. I think that when things are overly complex, they often hide a degree of insecurity or deceit. It demands a high degree of courage for a leader to keep things simple, not simplistic, but simple, because simplicity creates transparency, and when things are simple, you don't have anywhere to hide. What's your reaction to that?
I love the visual about complex adaptive systems and the swimming school of fish. You just need to move and change with things, and I think your articulation of simplicity, or keeping things straightforward, it is kind of like, what's the next step? I think it doesn't mean you don't have to think about all of the other things, but in order to move, you really just need to think about what's the next move, right? And I think the only piece that complexity says is sometimes there are so many moves that, in fact, until you take the next move, the move 2 or 3 after that don't become very clear to you, right? So you just have to be focused on progression, moving forward as opposed to stopping. The school may swim this way or it may swim that way, but at the moment we're all moving this way, and it will continue to adapt, right?
So your adaptability and agility is key.
Absolutely.
It has been fantastic to have this conversation with you, Sarah. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your perspective. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Edith.
Thank you.